Imagine leaving your home without knowing if you'll ever return, leaving behind your family or having a family that lives separated in different places around the world. Imagine having to leave behind a life you love deeply just because you have no other option. Imagine fleeing a country where your voice, your vote and your opinion don't matter. That was the reality for Venezuelans for the past 28 years. Yesterday, the country was attacked, and today they are celebrating.
I'm in Barcelona today, a city where more than 17,000 Venezuelans live. That makes up 1% of the population of Barcelona, and we are only talking about the city, not its surroundings. Most of them left their country because they have been failed, tortured and betrayed by their government for years. And today, on the 4th of January 2026, there is a concentration here in front of the Arch of Triumph in Barcelona, where Venezuelans show their reaction of an attack that was done by the US government on Venezuela just yesterday. There are some people seeing this attack as breaking international law, and others that are actually seeing it as a liberation of a dictatorship. But honestly, I don't really care about the opinion of different people. I care about the opinion of Venezuelans, because they are the only ones that should give their opinion on this attack. So I'm here to just ask them. But before we actually join this concentration, I want to give you a short little recap on the events that happened just yesterday on January 3rd in Venezuela.
In the early hours of January 3rd, 2026, the United States launched a large-scale military operation against Venezuela. US forces targeted the military infrastructure. The objective of the operation was to capture Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and the First Lady Cilia Flores. US Special Operations Forces succeeded in detaining them, and they were flown to New York for prosecution on charges including narco-terrorism and drug trafficking. US President Donald Trump announced that the United States would temporarily run Venezuela and help oversee a safe and proper transition. The attack triggered sharp international reactions. Some countries condemned the strike as an illegal intervention. Legal experts and international law scholars called the attack a breach of the UN Charter. Maduro supporters and officials condemned the attack and called for resistance, seeing it as imperialist aggression. And then some opposition figures and Venezuelans abroad celebrated Maduro's removal as liberation after years of political and economic crisis.
Yo de momento, hasta hoy, yo no le llamaría intervención.
We've done everything. We went and voted. We've gone out and we've been killed.
I don't want to say I'm happy, but I'm to some extent I'm pleased.
Muchos estamos en shock.
Maybe you're now wondering how these people whose country just got attacked only yesterday are now here seemingly celebrating it. Well, the reason is pretty simple actually. If you know the history of Venezuela a little bit, you definitely understand why they are here right now. I've been to Venezuela in 2023. It was probably the best trip I've ever done. And trust me when I say that if you ever go to Venezuela, you will find the kindest people, the most open-minded, loving people on earth. They welcomed me with open arms. They are always smiling, always putting you in a good mood, and they just appreciate you being there. But once you start talking to a Venezuelan, at some point they will always start talking about a family member and friends that is living abroad. And while Venezuelans are usually always smiling, always seeming to be happy, I couldn't help but notice to also see a lot of sadness in their eyes whenever they started to talk about these family members or the life they once had. Venezuela has been suffering under the government since almost 30 years. And I couldn't help but realize when I traveled through Venezuela that there's a lot of pro-Venezuelan propaganda in the country. And honestly, it is in general not that bad because Venezuelans have a lot of things to be proud of. However, this propaganda wasn't just made to emphasize on the beauty of the country. If you walk through Caracas, for example, you will constantly see the eyes of Hugo Chavez watching your every single step. Hugo Chavez was the president that started the government in 1998. He's basically responsible for all of the suffering, for a huge devaluation of Venezuelan currency. He's responsible for tortures of his own people. He's responsible for assassinations. He's responsible for a lot of poverty in the country and a lot of suffering. After his death, Nicolás Maduro took over and he continued with the same government. The country only got worse and worse and worse. In the end, more than 8 million people have left the country, not because they ever dreamed about leaving the country, living abroad. They left because of necessity, because it was the only way to survive and to support their families that stayed in Venezuela. And then on July 28, 2024, there were the last elections in Venezuela. Elections that were won by Edmundo González. However, the government of Nicolás Maduro didn't accept it. They said this was a lie and pretended that they won the election. They continued their government, and everybody that was trying to state their opinion publicly or to demonstrate was shut down violently.
Let's now give Venezuelans a voice, as their voice is the only one that truly matters.
You are celebrating what exactly here today?
So yesterday was a really important day in Venezuela because the dictator of Venezuela, as we consider it, Nicolás Maduro, was finally gotten out of the country. He was facing criminal charges not only in the US, but he has open investigations in front of the UN, in front of the OAS. So that was a really important step on our fight, on our way forward to democracy.
Yesterday there was an intervention in your country. How do you actually feel about that intervention?
It's such a bittersweet feeling, to be honest. On one side, I'm not happy that this is happening because we always thought that by trying the lawful means, we were going to be able to get them out. But we've done everything. We went and voted, we've gone out and we've been killed. There are more than 1,000 political prisoners just because they sent a WhatsApp message. So I'm not celebrating the strikes. I am celebrating that finally someone decided, obviously with their own reasons and their background, and they want to keep whatever they want to keep, but they decided to actually come in and help us.
Yo de momento, hasta hoy, yo no le llamaría intervención. Digo que fue una extracción del líder de un movimiento que no respetó los resultados del 24 de julio, del 28 de julio del 2024. Bueno, tienes que pensar que ya la dictadura del chavismo tiene 26 años, el movimiento democrático venezolano tiene muchos años intentando de que esto ocurriera de una mejor manera, de una manera más pacífica. Lamentablemente no ha habido apoyo, el mundo le dio la espalda a Venezuela y bueno, tuvimos que llegar a estas consecuencias.
How do you feel now that you know that Maduro is behind bars?
I'm relieved. I'm scared.
Scared why?
Because Maduro is just one of them.
I don't want to say I'm happy, but I'm to some extent I'm pleased. It's like I felt some sort of relief because I know, and I've lived in Venezuela, and I know how many people, especially the political prisoners, have suffered the dictatorship. It's important also to say that it's not only Maduro, so it's an entire regime. Maduro is only the tip of the iceberg, and now we need to get a way forward to get in charge of the country and to verify that a transition is just, it's fair, and that also includes those that we don't necessarily agree with.
Yo no siento que Venezuela está libre todavía. En Venezuela todavía hay más de 800 presos políticos. En Venezuela todavía el salario mínimo no sirve para vivir, para comer. Siento que hay un camino muy largo por delante, pero también veo como que este es un primer paso. Tenemos motivos para estar alegres. Muchos estamos en shock.
The reality is that we still have two major terrible assets inside of the country that they need to leave, and they're not going to leave unless they get killed. That's a reality.
How do you feel about people who are demonstrating for the liberation of Maduro?
That was fun because yesterday, so we're recording this in Barcelona. We have the Arc de Triomphe right now. Yesterday we were really close over that way. It was Urquinaona. We have the Venezuelan consulate over there. I approached the guys because I wanted to see why they were doing what they were doing. And I was surprised because there was not a single Venezuelan in there. It was mainly Europeans. So I'm not going to say they don't have the right to protest because in Venezuela they don't have it, that's for sure. I'm pleased they have it here in Europe in a state which is ruled by the law. But I didn't understand the reasons of the motivations behind it. And every time I spoke, they told me, no, you're Venezuelan. You don't have the perspective or the angle to speak about it. So Because some people like to speak about privilege and other things, but when it's about the Euro-splaining, so to say, I like to call it, it doesn't apply if you're from the right or you're from the left.
They can go and live there. I can give them a room whenever they want. My house is open to them, and there are 9 million rooms open for them to go and live that. They're open to go and leave it. And then we are going to talk about it. Then we can talk about it.
Es una percepción muy personal, esta es gente que nunca ha vivido en Venezuela, gente que nunca ha estado en Venezuela, así que no conocen las condiciones y probablemente es gente que tiene una visión del mundo que es completamente diferente a la visión que viven los venezolanos, a la realidad que viven los venezolanos. Yo invito a toda esa gente que no que lean lo que digan los políticos ni escuchen lo que digan los políticos. Yo invito a esa gente que lea todos los reportes de las ONG que aún quedan en Venezuela y que se han tomado el trabajo de documentar todo el tema de la falta de comida, de la falta de medicinas, de los presos políticos y que en base a eso ellos tomen una decisión a ver si van a seguir apoyando a Maduro.
How do you feel about people saying that Trump only did it to steal the petroleum of Venezuela?
Yes, they want our petroleum. I know. We are not stupid, but Iranians, Chinese, Cubans, I cannot even start naming them because there's so many. They have been already stealing our petroleum. So why is the left so concerned about our petroleum right now? They were not concerned during the 26 years when kids were dying in hospitals, when they didn't have medicines. We want our country back. And if that means having Trump on our side, knowing that he's not the best person to have on our side, who cares?
But what about China? What about Russia? I think it's about 90% of the oil fields in Venezuela are already managed by China, and not necessarily by the means of laws, because there's a lot of corruption. So there's China, there's Russia, there's also Cubans. The EU itself, the European Union, has imposed sanctions on many Venezuelan companies because of the ways they do business illegally. So it's not only the states that has interest in Venezuela, but all other countries too.
Venezuela is actually the country that has the most reserves on petroleum on earth. So, of course, the critics that Trump only did it because he wants to steal the petroleum of Venezuela are, well, they aren't without a reason. Obviously, this whole mission, this whole operation that Trump did was an investment. And of course, he wants something back from that. We've just heard it. Venezuelans aren't stupid, they know that. However, if you know the history of Venezuela a bit, you also know that this has been the situation before already. Actually, in the 50s, there were a lot of people immigrating into Venezuela in search of opportunities. At that time, Venezuela was a very well-developed country with lots of opportunities and lots of job offers in the petroleum industry. The companies that worked in the petroleum industry were foreign countries. They weren't from Venezuela. They were mostly from the United States, from the Netherlands and from the UK. And at that time, Venezuela won 50% of the earnings from that petroleum industry, even though Venezuela didn't do anything for it. Whether that is okay or not, you can decide on that. But the point is, Venezuela has been there before. And during that time, when it's been there, it was a flourishing country.
Do you believe that from now on things will get better in Venezuela? Do you think there's more hope now for the country in general?
I think we all, I don't know if believe, but we all want to. One side or the other, we all want Venezuelans to get better because we have family in there, we are connected with them, we suffer their struggle. Not in the way they do because it's a really serious situation. I'm really afraid Europeans don't get as much of exposure of how bad the situation is really in Venezuela, but leaving the politics aside because it's a really important issue, basic human rights, basic public services are not being guaranteed to the population. So that for me is the main thing in order to move ahead.
I really hope that things will get better now and that this is only the first step of a process of a huge improvement for the entire country and its people.
If you still don't understand it, let me clarify one thing. They aren't celebrating any attack or bombings, neither an invasion. They are celebrating the spark of hope that after all this time, Venezuela may finally overcome a dictatorship.
Whatever you may think about this attack on Venezuela, it's probably right. However, I believe there are two different realities. One reality that is, for example, from the European point of view, people just like myself that luckily never experienced living under a dictatorship for almost 30 years. And of course, from that point of view, it is very easy to judge this attack as an illegal intervention or an illegal invasion. But then there's the other point of view, which is the Venezuelan point of view. It is a point of view that comes from a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of fear, and yet also a lot of hope that they felt. Hope that at some point Venezuela will be free. Honestly, I don't really care what other people think. I believe the only valid point of view is the Venezuelan point of view. It is their opinion that truly matters. So if they want to celebrate, let them celebrate.